start and leave the door open for any last-minute stragglers. But I wanted to thank everybody for coming. This is a really exciting event for CPE to have, and I think what Tone and I were envisioning happening is more of like an intimate conversation for those of you who were lucky enough, I guess just professors, to attend our ceremony in Cheshire in the spring. Tone was spoke at the ceremony about a concept that he came up with, a new political prisoner, that he's going to talk about today, and I thought it would be a fun way to engage CPE staff, faculty, and student volunteers to talk about some of the issues. But before we begin, I also just want to congratulate Tone and talk about how proud we are as a program for his success so far and what he plans to do. This is a really exciting moment for us. Tone was our first student release, and he's already gained admission to UConn, and he's doing really well, and he plans to, or he's majoring in urban and community studies. And without getting too choked up, I want to just express how proud we are of you and of all your accomplishments, and we're really excited to see what happens next. So Tone will take over.
Good afternoon. Me, Antonio Rivera. I'm 25 years old. I'm the first released, I'm just going to reiterate some of what Lexi said. I was in prison for 5 years of a 12-year sentence. I'm actually been admitted as an undergraduate to UConn, and at one of the Wesleyan CPE ceremonies in Cheshire, I gave a speech and I introduced a new concept called the new political prisoner. And it's like, I know that the concept itself, just the title, the new political prisoner, can just automatically bring about an idea in your mind that this is something radical. But in all actuality, the underlying motive behind me creating a concept like that, using these terminology, was for something positive, and it's not for anything radical, even though if the approach is radical itself. But this is not just like this whole gathering here. I'm actually looking forward to like engaging with you guys. Feel free to like ask questions. I mean, I'm not the teacher, or we have professors here, but I'm not saying raise your hand. Like, speak, question me, question some of these things, challenge them. I'm not looking to arrive at any conclusive facts about anything. These are just broad ideas that I'm bringing to the table. And I'll start off by answering one of the questions. What is the new political prisoner as a concept? Historically, does anybody know what a political prisoner is or was? Okay.
I've heard of it.
All right, well, a political prisoner is someone who basically is incarcerated or taken away out of their natural environment for their political or religious or some type of beliefs that they have. It's basically a belief system that is in conflict with the government or whatever authority that's in control of the society. So basically your beliefs will get you removed. Okay, so that's historically what a political prisoner was. The new political prisoner are men and women in prison who, through higher education, become politically awakened. So this is a far stretch from what the original term political prisoner was used for and what its definition is. Who are new political prisoners? New political prisoners are men and women in prison who are college students or who come in contact with higher education and through that become politically awakened. Let me ask the question to everybody. Can someone describe to me what a terrorist looks like?
I've been known to look as a terrorist.
I mean, like, just, how about a drug dealer? What does a drug dealer look like?
I've been known to.
Okay.
A black male.
Okay. Black male.
The stuff he
wanna give it a
wears,
shot?
you know, the way he wears his clothes, the way he carries himself, like Doug does, got that look, that fit.
Got that look, right? Okay. What about a college student? What is? Can anybody describe?
I've been known to look like a college.
Cool. Anybody like what? Let's say a college sweatshirt maybe that with some type of logo. Maybe a book bag, right?
Right.
Maybe an iPod or something. Okay. So what if we have that image in our head of a college student with the book bag, the sweater, but there's a bomb in the book bag, and the iPod is actually something that's gonna set this bomb off. Now this college student is a terrorist. So my whole purpose of that is basically saying that identity is a very blurry thing. It's not something that we can actually set our minds on and have these fixed perceptions about. So identity is something complex, and that's the purpose of me saying that, using that example. We have fixed perceptions about identities, and it's a very complicated matter, particularly when we're talking about guys who are incarcerated, who may have come from very troubling backgrounds, dysfunctional families, low economic situations, impoverished communities, all sorts of situations. But meaning, in my belief, I believe that individuals from urban communities have limited access to realistic identities that they can conform to. Meaning that basically they look for identities to conform to and embrace based on what's in their environment, based on what identities are prevalent within that environment. So what they see maybe are drug dealers. They see this activity. So now, since we couldn't actually define what a terrorist or a drug dealer might look like, I chose to settle on the thought that these identities are actually abstractions. Meaning we know they exist, but they're hard to confirm in the material world. As that's something that we can actually pinpoint or come to a consensus about what they're supposed to look like. So what happens when you got a kid who grows up in an urban community, who has limited access to realistic identities, who finds himself in prison and then comes in contact with higher education? What happens, in my belief, is that there is an identity crisis. Because this person may have looked in the mirror for years and had believed to be the embodiment of an abstraction. That being a drug dealer, a thief, a robber, anything where the crime is related to what a person may believe they are. They may use the crime as a foundation to solidify their identity. But when you come in contact with higher education, what happens is you start to come in conflict. That identity that you created is in conflict now. Because you're now thinking in different ways, and now you're seeing society from a different perspective. Now you're seeing society from the perspective of a college student, no longer as an individual who's living in this underground economy, in this subculture trapped within the urban community. Okay, so the purpose of the new political prisoner concept. My purpose was, in the classroom in CPE, as the professors can probably agree with me, it's a very intense environment. And the classrooms are intense. And Buell, especially Buell's class, because I'm surprised Buell's stuff got through. Serious. Because there's like rules in prison, like you can't read certain material because if it's racially motivated and stuff like that. But we have historic literature that is racially motivated, and we were reading through it, and emotions got charged up. Luckily, nothing crazy happened, but in the classroom, I mean, you got I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with basically the demographics of prison population. Majority is black. Second is Hispanic. Then it's white, and then goes other races and stuff like that, or ethnicities. Basically, what I saw as a student in the CPE program, as supposed to be a student of Wesleyan represented inside a prison, I saw that we were divided, and I saw that we focused so much on our differences rather than what we had in common. And I saw that what we had in common was we came from a similar class background. I was looking for what did we have in common as classmates, and I saw that we all came from a similar class background. Instead of focusing on what separated us, our skin tone, our choice of dialect of slang, you will be surprised on how prisoners further segregate themselves beyond what the institutional segregation that's already put in place. So I was looking to bring the class together. And I said, how can I bring the class together in a powerful way? And I thought that if I gave us all a single identity, because Professor Lemur, and he struggled with this, he's like, well, what are you guys? As prisoners taken, in college. And we kind of settled on the term convicted scholars. And I wasn't satisfied with that. We were convicted scholars. And of course I wasn't satisfied with it because it had the conviction in front of scholars. So I was like, it was cool and it was more of a joke, but I was like, no, we're new political prisoners, I wanted something more powerful, something that I saw as more positive in my mind. Of course, people could say, this is radical, Antonio. What are you saying? But what I was trying to bring about was something called class consciousness. And class consciousness is a sociological term, and basically through higher education, this group of new political prisoners was going to come into recognition of social inequalities that they face, as an oppressed group. And through this recognition of social inequalities, social political inequalities, they were going to lead to revolutionary action. I hope I'm not losing you guys. No, so let's I'm sorry, because I know some of the stuff
do
is
what?
far-reaching. Yeah, revolutionary action. What do I mean by revolutionary action? I'm talking about political prisoners, new political prisoners, revolutionary action. Basically, what I'm speaking on is a change of perception. The revolution is a psychological thing. It's a change of perception on an individual level, and it's a change of perception on a broader level. I wanted correction officers and everybody who has something to do with the prison system to start to have a different perception of what a prisoner is and what a prisoner is capable of. I wanted the individual prisoner to also see themselves as something different than maybe those fixed or limited identities that they may have conformed to based on their environmental influences. So basically, the purpose of it was class consciousness. And once again, class consciousness, and looking at my notes, is this new political prisoner identity will lead to the recognition of socio-political inequalities faced on part of the oppressed, leading to revolutionary action. So revolutionary action would be, now we have correction officers no longer seeing an inmate. Now the correction officer sees a college student or a potential social service individual. Someone who can possibly have a life beyond prison. He's now seen as somebody different. And now when he looks in the mirror, this kid who had limited access to what identities to conform to, he sees something different also. The tans are falling off in front of his face, and he's looking in the mirror, and he doesn't see a drug dealer anymore. Because we couldn't identify a drug dealer to begin with. So what he was identifying was actually an abstraction, and it was actually because he had limited access to realistic identities to conform to. But the higher education, the power of knowledge is so powerful that it can disrupt and cause an identity crisis, but it can be a positive thing, and individuals can actually start to see themselves, and they can see their role in society as something totally different than what society may have set up for them. Now, why political prisoner as a concept is important and why the political in the middle of it. I basically broke down why it's a new, is because we're breaking away from the historical definition of political prisoner. It's political because it's political because the only way you can come about into class consciousness is if you have an understanding of how society works. And then you have to challenge those in power. Well, how would a prisoner figure out how society works?
Life experience.
Life experiences, higher
College
education, school. That's how he would figure out how society works. So in order to bring about the class consciousness, he needs the education. And that's what CPE did. CPE brought to the table the education that was going to provide the information for the prisoners to come into class consciousness. And once they came into that class consciousness, they have an identity to form into, to embrace as new political prisoners. And now this can lead to revolutionary action. Now they no longer see them, because I have to tell you this, in prison there's so many guys that already have their mind made up on what they're going to do when they get out. And what they're going to do is what they did that got them there.
Maybe a little better, a little
And
smarter.
speaking what, yeah, that's the belief. Okay, I had time to reflect. I should have never went to this girl's house. The police was there. They really try to rationalize, they, meaning the prisoners, convicted individuals, try to rationalize on what they did wrong and how they could become better criminals. It's true. It is like that. But with higher education, they start to see things different. You start to see yourself as somebody different. I mean, you're reading about Frederick Douglass, a self-educated slave, and an individual who actually started meeting with presidents and had an influence. Like, you see these powerful historical achievements, and you start to question, like, what am I doing in society? Who am I in society? If Frederick Douglass didn't settle with his position that society put Frederick Douglass as a slave. That was the society at that time. So that was the culture of the time. Slavery was an institution that ran the American economy, and Frederick Douglass didn't choose to be a slave. That's the era he was born into. But Frederick Douglass chose otherwise. And when an individual in prison who may see himself as somewhat of a slave to a system, you don't want to settle with this identity that you have when you came into prison. You want to actually come into a different identity. And I believe that the new political prisoner is a start. It's something that can bring a classroom of different individuals, prisoners who have different time frames. Just my class in CPE, I had 12 years. Other individuals, 55 years, 77 years, 20 years, 30 years. I mean, the times are just amazing, like the amount of time that's in a room. And I used to walk into the classroom sometime in Cheshire and be like, wow, there's like 500 years sitting around me. That's how I used to think of it, like just years just around me, and that's part of the intensity that you can feel. And me being aware of the power that resided in the classroom, I'm like, we're all here together in this classroom getting this information, but are we here as a group? And what is a group? Does anybody know what a group is? Are we a group right now?
Yes.
I believe so.
Because we're interacting face to face. A group is more than two people that interact face to face. And we were a group and we were a class, but I felt that there was a power there that can be harbored, and I felt that if we embrace this new political prisoner concept, that it can lead to revolutionary action. Yes,
Can I ask the first question?
Sure.
You brought up Buell's class a lot, and for those of you who don't know, Professor Buell taught early American intellectual history. But I'm wondering if you can maybe talk on how classes like Elizabeth's class, who taught Greek tragedy, how something like that doesn't directly correlate to an American identity like American history does, but still is potentially useful in this political awakening. Maybe Elizabeth can speak to it as well.
Okay, well,
Put you on the spot.
yeah, that was,
I didn't mean to put you on the
that was
spot.
really on the spot.
I'm taking notes.
That was specific. Yeah,
Or any other class
I
that
could
wasn't
start, I could
American
start us
history.
and then I think it
yeah,
would.
help me out.
Do you remember the first movie where we read Ajax?
Yep.
And Clyde was really blown away by it. About, this is someone who had been really a mighty man in his community and then was deeply disrespected and removed himself from everybody who depended on him.
Yep.
And so we talked a lot about what happens in the community when you,
Yeah. If I remember Ajax,
or not
but not specifically that, but I know like you talking about the relevancy of Greek tragedy.
Well, I'm talking about the relevancy of, people would argue against the liberal arts in prison. And I think that,
Okay, I understand.
and so more like, those classes that don't have direct
Okay.
products out of it,
Okay, Wesleyan, you guys are Wesleyan students, and there's like an argument against like this type of teaching. Wesleyan is considered as like an artsy school. A lot of, so like how are prisoners going to use these type of courses and this type of material? But this information that is being brought to the table, like a Greek tragedy course, has just powerful uses on an individual level. Because now come into contact with the type of information that you're receiving about Greek tragedy and all of these things, they have a personal use that is really hard to like define. But if anything, it's just a change of thought pattern. That's what it does. It changes your thought pattern and your outlook on a lot of things. So just to recap some of the things I said, the new political prisoner is a concept that I created, and it started off as a speech, and the purpose of it was to describe men and women in prison who through higher education become politically awakened. That's the new political prisoner. Who are new political prisoners? Men and women in prison receiving higher education that come into a political awareness. Yes, sir.
Do you think someone can become a new political prisoner and like have class consciousness without necessarily coming into contact with higher education?
Absolutely, but they wouldn't be a prisoner. So they wouldn't be a new political prisoner. But I understand what you're saying, that they can have that occurrence take place, become politically awakened without being, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, people in prison, for instance, who like get a hold of like a really cool book or something like that like changes the way they think, Like, with that, because like, CPE sounds like a really great program, but I imagine that most people in the prison aren't able to access it.
True. Yeah, like self-education, the practice of just reading books and just teaching yourself different, have different information and opening up your mind to all types of things. Yeah, it can be, you can come into that political awakening. Why is it important for a prisoner to be politically awakened? Why? Like why? Why does it matter? Why am I emphasizing on the political awakening of the prisoner?
expand their mind.
Expand their mind.
Become a citizen.
Because they are disenfranchised.
Yeah, become
Once you're in the court system, once you plead guilty, the first thing that happens is you lose your right to vote. That's it. So it's very political from the beginning, and that's what I want the prisoners to understand, that their disposition was political. That what basically what I'm saying is that not to remove anybody from facing responsibility for their individual actions, but when you look at the system as a whole, meaning the judicial system, a lot of thought goes into what laws are created and how things are going to work. It's very systemic. And when something is that systemic and organized, you have to make it political because it involves large groups of people that are being pushed through systems. It's political. So you need political awareness. Does anybody know what district they come from or what district they live in? Like, who's your district representative on a municipal or city level? Steve, do you know who your district representative is?
Don't put me on the spot.
Does anyone know Middletown?
Goes to the lower.
Anybody know who their district representative is?
I do. Yeah.
We have some politically awakened people in here. But I know that when you go into urban communities, you're not going to see individuals who know who their district representative is. They're not going to know how to access the Chamber of Commerce. They're not going to know who's in charge of the city council. Like these things, there's basically broad span of political ignorance, for lack of a better word. It's political ignorance. So I spoke to a retired representative, state representative, Louis J. Wallace, and I had won a poetry contest when I was in 5th grade, a national poetry contest, and came in 3rd place. And this state representative came into my elementary school and gave me some prize, and I was shocked. He was a black man, bless you. And I was just, just a kid and everything. And I seen him, he's like, yeah, I'm state representative, Lou Wallace, pictures flashing. I'm like, all right, cool. So I'm working and I run into Lou Wallace again, and I never forgot Lou Wallace because he was like, he came to my community and he started a track team in the projects and everything. And this was a part of his political ambition. He was setting the stage for later on for running into politics. And what I'm saying is that I asked Lou on the phone recently, I said, Lou, there's a lot of people in the urban community who are politically ignorant, or they don't have a lot of knowledge about politics, even on a city level. Why isn't there anyone in city government taking the initiative to bring political awareness to the urban community? And Lou didn't really have a response. He's like, yeah, you're talking about some real interesting things, Antonio. And I'm like, yeah, Lou, because I'm wondering, like, what's going on here?
I want to know.
What's going on? How come we don't know who our representatives are? These are people who are public servants. They're responsible for large groups of people in these communities, cities, small towns. So, just back to my point, that's where the political aspect is very important. And when you come into contact with the education and information that CPE is providing through Wesleyan faculty and professors,
You can finish your statement.
okay, that brings about, that's the material, that's the information is there. If the information is there, there's a potential for class consciousness. Class consciousness, again, is recognition of social inequalities of the oppressed meaning the disenfranchised, the prisoners. And this brings about revolutionary action. Revolutionary action being a change of perception on who the individual sees themselves as and their role in society, and who the people in power within the prison system see the prisoner as, and who the prisoner sees himself as when he leaves out of prison. That's the revolutionary action. That's the new political prisoner. I'm going to get back to that.
Yeah. This is fabulous. Thanks, Tom, for being here. And I just want to reiterate what Lexi said earlier, how proud we are of you, and want to provide whatever support we can. So 2 questions. 1, you are no longer a prisoner. So how do you categorize yourself, or what do you call yourself now that you have been released? And 2, how are you putting your awakenings into action? I think you gave 1 example in terms of your outreach to a senator, but are there other examples?
Okay, who do I see myself as? I see myself as, this is going to be interesting, a free radical. I'm a free radical. That's your right. Huh?
That means you're apolitical.
Yeah. But when I'm saying, but if anything, that was a joke. But I see myself as a college student. And how I'm putting this into action, my political awareness and my awakening, I'm putting it into use by reaching out. Lexi can, vouch for me. While I was in class, I was just multitasking like crazy, creating programs. I created a program, PASS, Prisoner Assistance and Social Services, that focuses on things like drafting bills and pushing the bills to politicians in power, to look at things like the imbalance in employment for guys getting out of prison and stuff like that. Particularly, I thought about, on applications, they have the question, the box if you're gonna check it and everything. And I thought about removing the box, and they have a no box bill. You know, Paul shaking his head, he knows about the no box bill. I think it's a bill that started in Hawaii and got adopted by a few other states, and Connecticut adopted it in 2010. And the no box bill is basically to remove the question of if you have been convicted of a felony from all applications. Now, Connecticut adopted this bill and made it a law in 2010, and the interesting part, there's a loophole to this. This law only asks if it's only relevant towards if you're applying for a public position. So like if you're going for a state job, that's where it's only relevant. If you're, so how many guys are getting out of prison that are going to apply at the mayor's office? See, so it's political again. Laws and what laws they choose to pass. It's political. So things like that. One of my ideas to put the political awakening to use was I drafted bills. And I'm sitting here like, I got these bills, these laws and stuff. I'm gonna literally try to link up I'm looking at what bills have been proposed, what bills have been shot down, what bills didn't make it through, and I'm thinking I'm going to contact this person and give them my idea so they can push the bill through. And my idea, one of them, was to basically remove the question for if you have been convicted of a felony from all applications for both public and private jobs. And I was saying to replace that with there's these programs set up by the government, and the federal bonding program is money that gives bonding insurance for hiring at-risk employees, like guys who've gotten out of prison, and removing that. So now when you look at a job application and it says, are you eligible for the federal bonding program? Or are you eligible for the work opportunity tax credit? Which means when someone hires a convicted felon, they'll get money from the government for hiring an at-risk employee. So now there's an incentive there for a guy who checks the box, yeah, I am eligible for that. I do have a felony. So now the employer sees that and says, okay, if he's eligible for this program, that means he has a felony. He's checking it. He's being honest about his background. For one, the employer who hires the guy in prison, the ex-convict, he gets money for hiring somebody who's an at-risk employee, and he gets insurance in case he happens to steal something, break something, or whatever. So there's just a lot of things that can be put into place on a political level and what you can do with the political awakening. And some of the ideas that came to me were creating bills that actually will change things. Because if you look at any real significant change that took place for disenfranchised populations, it's legislative change, laws. The laws are what put them there, and the laws are what are going to free them and give them more opportunities. What's up, Paul?
Good to see you again.
Good to see you.
Okay, two questions. First is, I'm wondering, there's a new popular slogan within the sort of anti-prison, especially the anti-prison expansion movement, that is basically says, all prisoners are political. And it's a chant that's often used, a slogan that basically talks about exactly what you were saying before about how people who are in prison are generally come from disenfranchised backgrounds that are more about society and laws and so I'm wondering how do you feel about that slogan? Does that fit somewhere with your new political prisoner idea? And I'm also wondering, as a formerly incarcerated new political prisoner, how have your political ideas changed about prison?
They haven't. I'm faced with the same disadvantages that what I'm doing now is I'm seeing that everything that, the concept of new political prisoner, with that new slogan, it does fit in, to answer your question on that part. And what I'm seeing now in my life is that the disadvantages are very real. They're real. It's hard to get a job, extremely hard. I was considered lucky, and I don't believe in luck, to be employed right now and to have access to certain resources. But my ideas about prison and everything haven't changed. Of course, in there, they were more intimate, meaning that they were just more personalized. I didn't like the COs because, They tried to create power out of authority. Not to go on a tangent, but, you know, authority means you have a legitimate position to enforce rules, and power is when you have the ability to influence. You can have a guy in an urban community who is the leader of a large gang or a little gang, and he can have power. He can influence. He can get people to do things, but he has no authority. He has no legitimate position, you know? So the COs, what I saw, the correctional officers, as they had authority, but they wanted power. So they tried to create power out of authority, and that's where we conflicted. So some of my ideas haven't changed. There were also great correctional officers. Some of them who borrowed my books, you know? And they came by, and I had stacks of books. And the COs would walk by, and they're like, "You're not really reading all those books, are you?" And I'm like, "I actually am. I actually read more than half of them." So, yeah, but I still see things as basically something needs to change. And I can just jump into this. Prison as a body. What was very interesting, I took Melanie Price at the same time with Melanie. So I was taking a political science course, and I was taking Professor McAleer's biochemistry, molecular, basically, yeah. So I'm looking at the body, the science of the government, you know, of the body of government, and I'm looking at the science behind the human body, and I'm making these correlations. And I started to think about prison as a body, as an organism. And this can just go back to like social Darwinism and things like that, where, you know, people try to look at society as an organism. And I thought, well, the human body has cells, a prison has cells. Okay, I was locked in a maximum security prison for 4.5 years, so that means maximum security in Connecticut means limited movement. The cell door doesn't open that often. That means you're inside of your cell for about 22 hours a day. In the room, probably the size smaller than some of your closets. So what I started thinking was, what happens when cells in the human body stop moving? Can you help me out?
Sure. Well, it depends. If your blood cells stop moving, you're dead. You got to be moving, you know, food and nutrients and gases and exchange and water around, and the organism will die without moving.
So what happens when the cells in prison are not moving? The prison body, in my mind, I see as you have prisoners inside of a body where there's cells that are not moving. So I kind of saw it as this. What is life? And I saw life in its simplest definition as movement. And I believe you said something to this notion that where you see movement, you'll find life. So where there's life, there's movement. Okay. The judicial system sentences individuals to life inside of a body that lacks movement. How interesting is that? You're giving me a life sentence inside of...
Yeah, it feels weird in there.
It's weird.
Yeah.
Especially for a person who knew they're leaving. I was essentially felt like I was walking around people who were alive but weren't, because they lack movement. And that's just an interesting thing right there. You know, that's something I just put out there. Just to put in your head, the prison as a body. Give a guy a life sentence in a place that lacks movement. Life consists of movement. He's in a place that lacks movement. How does he serve life sentence in a place where there's no life? It's contradictory. Yes, Kim.
I'm curious, so you talk about, I think you make this really powerful argument about the point of or the value of changing your perception of yourself as a prisoner, and this new political identity for yourself. But I'm wondering, like you said, you have all these sort of pretty powerful and revolutionary ideas for ways we can change the laws or ways we can change a system, but it seems like that needs a change in perception for the people who do have this power and authority and their perception of prisoners. Because even if you have this awakening, it seems like you've found that you're still stigmatized by a lot of other people because you were a prisoner. So you still have all these obstacles in trying to get a job or trying to be, a student or whatever you're trying to do, not because of your own personal abilities, but because of the way people from the outside are viewing you. So I'm curious if you have any ideas to how we as a society can change the way that we perceive prisoners in general, or whether that is something that's necessary for the kind of action that you think would actually make these changes in the law or in larger society.
I mean, that's why I'm here right now. I'm just here today. It's not really, I had to ask myself this question, like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why am I presenting this to these kids? Like, you guys are smart, you guys have lives, you guys have things to do. But what I'm doing, what I believe, what I hope to be doing, is to give an example that lead by example and exemplify the potential of prisoners, what potential is inside of prisons. There are guys in there who are self-educating themselves. There are guys who, thanks to CPE and Wesleyan, are getting access to higher education, who are changing their perception of their own individual identities and what role they play in society. So it is revolutionary. It's revolutionary on a perceptional level, and it's very important. Because when you get enough people to change their mind about something, now it seems society, we know how that works. Next thing you know, there's a commercial, coming out about a guy. Have anybody seen the commercial about the guys who run back to prison because the world is kind of crazy?
Yeah, God, I hate that.
But like imagery, the power of imagery. So I'm here as basically the power of imagery, to just basically, the power of suggesting. I'm just suggesting, because I have a long way to go. I have to make a lot of changes. I have a lot of struggles to face in my future. But yeah, it's very important to think about that and see how when guys get out, what they do with the knowledge. And that's like Du Bois' big thing, application is key. You're not defined by your circumstances. You have the opportunities, even though you face, Du Bois, I believe, settled with the idea that society is unequal, but it doesn't leave you in a position, and you still have all the opportunities. He said American society is unequal. There's inequalities, but it doesn't stop an individual from excelling beyond that. This is something very interesting that I'm just going to jump into. The criminal mind. Does anybody have any beliefs about the criminal mind or what they think it may be?
Criminal mind is clever.
The criminal mind is clever.
Yes.
You want to expand on that?
I'm saying they're very thoughtful. Good one.
Smart.
What is the criminal mind? Does it exist?
I remember thinking when I taught your cohort, and I'm thinking to myself, these are some of the best students I've ever had. And to borrow a phrase, excuse me if it offends you from Dorothy Allison, this is so fucked up. Why am I sitting here with this group of men who are some of the brightest minds I've seen, who have taught themselves, who have read and educated themselves and had discussions about Aristotle and Plato in their small selves, and who understand it, not just BSing. And so how did they come to be with all of these smarts and all of this intellectual abilities? They, according to the rules, they should not be in this place, but they are somehow. And that was the question that I asked myself over and over, which is why I like your new political prisoner, because part of the answer to me is that there is a political system outside the prison that funnels bright minds and men into it.
Yes. And that's what, C. Wright Mills called the ability to sociologically imagine, meaning the ability to know, to have an awareness of how society plays a role in your individual life and how your individual life plays a role in society. And thank you for that. Well, the criminal mind to me is a theory. The mind is something private, We speak about criminal, the root word would be crime. Crime is transgressions against public laws. So we have transgressions against public laws over here, and we have a private domain over here, which is your mind. So when you combine public law with the private domain of your mind, there's something contradictory going on there. So what I saw is that your thoughts are your thoughts. They're intellectual property. You own them. The example I'm going to use is this. You got a girl at a red light. All right, now this is just all for fun. Thank you. She has somewhere to go where she wants to be. Okay? So right here, she has the thought. Right? She's at the red light, and the thought comes to her to run the red light. Why? She has somewhere she wants to be, and the red light's taking extremely long. Okay? Way over here is the act of running the red light. What is needed in order for the thought to become an action?
The motive.
The motive, she has to be somewhere. But she needs a motivational force, and there's something that's missing. The criminal mind says that basically that people think things and then they act on them, which is animalistic, which means they respond instinctively to their environments. So there is a political and there is an agenda when you see TV shows and programs that say the criminal mind, and there's a lot of scientists and there's people in particular fields of study who are trying to establish the criminal mind as a concept, as something that's real, and they're having trouble with it. And there's only limited amounts of data to support the criminal mind as something real. And the reason why is because you take two terms like psychopath and sociopath. Okay, what's a psychopath? A person who lacks the ability to empathize with others. They can commit crimes and commit volitions without feeling anything. They lack the ability to put themselves in other people's shoes. Okay, so they can do things, they can act. So what is that? That's an emotional problem, right? If they can't feel, if they can't empathize, that means there's an emotional problem. Which means that if this woman at the red light wants to get to her thought, to the action, she needs emotion. And down here is emotion. This is my beliefs. You can challenge them. You don't have to agree with them. This is just me trying to think about things and concepts like the criminal mind. When I see these things, me being a convicted felon, I like to think and assess these things before I just embrace them as being real, you know? So that's all I'm doing.
So you're arguing, sorry, quickly, you're arguing against the idea that the criminal mind exists?
Yep.
Okay.
What emotion would she need, this girl at the red light, for her thought to become an action?
Let me ask you a question. Does she necessarily need emotion, or is she just not thinking, like, oh, I need to get somewhere, but there's no, I'm not going to think of a possible consequence that I'm going to hit somebody. So that would be my question about, is she starting with a thought, like the kind of, or which kind of thought? Is it like a thoughtful thought? Or just
something,
a want?
A want, a desire. I say she needs confidence. One, because she's not gonna run through the red light where if she needs the confidence to feel that running through this red light, that she's not gonna be physically harmed by oncoming traffic, right? That's for one. She needs the confidence to feel that running through this light, she's not gonna endanger herself. And two, she needs the confidence to believe she's not going to be caught by the authority for running through this light. So confidence is needed. She needs confidence in her physical safety and confidence that she's not going to be caught by the authorities. So emotion is needed. And I believe confidence is a feeling, therefore we can relate it to being an emotion. So thought, run the red light, and she has the confidence that she's not going to get caught and that she's not going to be physically harmed. Okay, the thought becomes an action, she runs through the red light. She's criminally minded, right? Everybody who's ran a red light is criminally minded?
I think that's totally normal, that we all have thoughts about actions, and we very quickly weigh the action has consequences that we're willing to bear or not bear. That's not criminal, that's
Yep.
And that's the thing. When guys are committing crimes or crimes are committed, they're categorized and they're going to be looked at as possessing a criminal mind. Subpart.
So, let's say in a hypothetical, this emotion is like, she's late to pick up her kid from school or something like that, or rushing to, in some sort of like emergency family situation. And let's say that in the process of deciding to run that red light, something does happen. She hits a pedestrian or something like that, or like a car or something. I think that, as I understand how people talk about the criminal mind, is that we erase from the picture the whole underlying emotional reason for having done that in the first place. Would you agree with that assessment? Is that, or do you have some?
I want to be clear. Could you just say that again? What you?
So like, there's something very deep and emotional and real for her as to why she chooses to drive through and run that red light. And so if something bad happens, if she hits somebody or if there's another car or something, the authorities, upon catching her, would assume would like take like that whole like reason for having run that red light, that emotional connection, whatever it is, out of the picture. They wouldn't really consider that, and so it would just be like thought and action.
Yeah.
And that like the whole underlying emotional reason for having done that in the first place, it becomes what I normally hear is like circumstantial. It becomes like something that's like part of it, but it's not like the essence or the core of why that happened.
Yeah.
Is that fit into this theory at all, or what do you?
I mean, it does fit in. I mean, if I understand you correctly, you're saying that if a crime takes place based on her acting on a thought, would she be considered in that context of possessing a criminal mind, or would she be removed from that? Would that not be considered?
I feel like she would be classified as having a criminal mind.
Yeah, she would. I mean, but even if she didn't crash into somebody's stuff, does she have a criminal mind? Is running the light for like when you commit a transgression against a public law, does that mean you possess a criminal mind?
I mean, I don't really think so. I agree with what you're saying about emotion and reason you got up too. And there's, it seems like there's a reason we call certain things like civil disobedience. Like, those are crimes too, but we would never say like Gandhi had a criminal mind or something like that. It seems like there's that contradiction there where like, if you ignore the emotion and the reason, then like it's a crime, but that's oversimplifying it.
Yeah. All right, so just to wrap this criminal mind theory up, and before we close out, what I believe with this criminal mind thing is that your mind is a private domain. Your thoughts are private, and they have nothing to do with the public until you act on them. And where the public or someone else outside of yourself can be harmed by these thoughts. And that's when you get into the realm of what's criminal. Now, this is what's interesting, because laws, what are laws? Laws are actually the material representation of non-material values. So we're back at that beginning of something non-material relating to something material. And that's why the law is what makes it seem like the criminal mind has to be possible. Okay? So that's where it seems justified. That if they're going against our non-material values and acting on them, then they must have a criminal mind. Because that's what the laws represent. They represent our values in society. So to close out, I'm gonna say just go over this quote from Aristotle. I had another quote I wanted to use that had to do with movement, but I was going crazy trying to find it and I couldn't. So I settled for this one. Inferiors revolt in order that they may be equal, equals that they may be superior. Anybody familiar with this quote, Aristotle or anything? Why I put this quote up there, why this quote stuck out to me? This quote stuck out to me. Inferiors, I would use for this particular situation, the disadvantage, revolt in order that they may be equal. We're going back to class recognition, and the class recognition is recognition of social inequalities. So the new political prisoners will revolt because in revolt meaning change their human behavior on an individual level to reflect something positive and not negative, to have the capacity to alter the perception of people who are in authority, positions of authority, that have the duty to oversee them in prison. So when we're looking at what I'm saying from this quote from Aristotle, I saw the new political prisoner came to mind. The disadvantage, just think of them as inferiors for this thing to relate it to Aristotle. He had used this for something different, but of course, the disadvantage may revolt in order that they may be equal. The political prisoner wants to be equal in society. When he leaves prison, he wants equality. And basically, Aristotle also said that where there is inequality, there will be revolution. The new political prisoners know they're unequal in society. Politically, it's political, the reason they're unequal. And equals that they may be superior. I'm not suggesting that new political prisoners should strive to be superior to other citizens in society. I believe that, because we're talking about perception and identity from the beginning, new political prisoners must strive to be superior to their past identities. They must become better on an individual level. They must be superior to who they once were. And that's, the slogan in Latin. I can't pronounce in Latin, but it's the slogan for Unified School District 1, which is Cheshire's education, is I am not what I once was. And that they obviously know that the power of education is serious. It can change an identity on an individual level. Y'all see a hand?
Can you tell us more about your personal journey, looking at yourself as yourself as a student, and this whole political change from like more personal, like how did you inmates look at you and you want yourself, maybe personal thoughts and you want to do the struggle one time, identifying yourself as a criminal, identifying yourself as a student.
Okay, she's asking me is that how did I identify myself individually, the process I went through from identifying myself as a criminal or into a student. That process wasn't overnight, of course. I went through numerous phases in prison. A lot of phases. At one point, I did think about going back and doing the same thing. And I did set up plans, even mathematical figures. How much money I'm gonna make if I do this, So, and that was 2007, I was in a certain prison, and that's the mind. I wasn't reading books. I didn't have CPE. I didn't have Wesleyan. I didn't have access to the information that would push me into this awakening. So, the process was just basically a personal thing. I started reading. I changed my own thought pattern based on information that I exposed myself to. So it was just, it's just fighting yourself like everybody else is. Everybody fights themselves. That's what we do on a constant basis. It's a never-ending battle. There's always something about yourself that you're not going to like and that you strive to make better, hopefully. Okay, so the reason why Aristotle is up there is because I believe that the new political prisoners should strive to become superior to their previous identities that they may have had prior to coming in contact with higher education. And, yep, that's all.
I'm not going to say anything. But thank you guys for coming, and we'll stick around for a little bit longer if you want to mingle.
I'm open to any type of question you
Yeah.
want to ask, but I'm sure you guys got better things to do.